The anti-criminalization protest campaign, which took place in Armagh Gaol, stands in the shadow of the H-Block protests, and the actions of female Republican prisoners are misrepresented as a mere extension of the actions of their male comrades. The Armagh women, though, undertook their protest campaign in their own right, exercising their own agency in order to assert their own identity as political prisoners. Far from being a mere solidarity action in support of their male comrades, the Armagh women's hunger strike was itself a unique event, loaded with strategic and symbolic importance. From the very beginning of the prison saga and the introduction of the criminalization policy in 1976, Republican POWs in the women's prison at Armagh resisted British attempts to label them and their cause as criminal. Like their male comrades, they protested using the only weapons at their disposal, their own bodies. Since all women prisoners in the North were permitted to wear their own clothing, the Armagh women did not engage in a blanket protest. They did, however, resist criminalization from the start by means of a no-work and non-cooperation protest. The women refused to carry out prison work or to acknowledge the authority of the prison staff. They observed their own command structure and maintained military discipline in the jail. On February 7, 1980, male prison warders were brought into Armagh from Long Kesh, ostensibly to help carry out a search of the women's cells. Their true mission was to brutalize and intimidate the women, and several prisoners were injured in the violent clashes which took place that day. When the search was finally over, the women were locked in their cells and denied access to the bathrooms. After the women were released from their cells the following day, the bathrooms remained locked. The women saw no choice but to embark upon a no-wash protest, spreading the contents of their overflowing chamber pots over their cell walls and refusing to bathe. The no-wash protest was naturally very difficult for the prisoners, but their conviction was strong. As far as they were concerned, the filth of excrement, urine, and menstrual blood was far less repulsive than the cruel label of criminal. After careful deliberation by the two leaders, 3 women were chosen to embark on the fast: Mairead Nugent, age 21, Mary Doyle, age 24, and Mairead Farrell, age 23. Additional volunteers were selected as backups to take the place of one of the initial 3 in the event of her death. The trio commenced their fast on December 1, 1980. In their official statement, they declared, "We are prepared to fast to the death if necessary, but our love for justice and our country will live forever." The 3 were immediately moved to share a double cell and were advised to drink 8 pints of water per day, with salt. Mary Doyle remembers being sick as a dog on that first night. She also recalls the constant efforts of the prison warders to torment the hunger strikers, ensuring that their cell was never without food. Plates of steaming hot chips replaced the barely edible slop which the women were usually served. Warders also delivered hate mail from the outside and shouted abuse at the hunger strikers. Mairead Farrell recalled one of them shouting, "Why don't you hurry up and die, you bastards?" In the face of such torment, the women drew comfort and strength from their comrades and the firm belief in the justice of their cause. The authorities tried to downplay the severity of the situation in Armagh. British Secretary of State Humphrey Atkins declared on December 12th that the women's condition was not yet giving any cause for concern. In fact, the rapidity with which the 3 women were losing weight was indeed concerning. By the day of Atkins's statement, each of the women had lost approximately 15 pounds, meaning that they had lost more weight in their first 11 days than the men had lost in their first 26 days. The men's average weight loss being approximately 11.5 pounds on November 21st. The strikers' comrades recall noticing a rapid deterioration in their friends' condition. Sile Dara described them as emaciated and little more than bags of bones. She recalls that the 3 grew incredibly pale and that even their shoes seemed too big for their feet. Mairead Farrell's mother recalled seeing a terrible change in her daughter, whose face became so thin that she began to have difficulty speaking. Although the women retained their strength and spirit, it was clear that the fast was taking its toll. Less than 2 weeks into the Armagh hunger strike, Sile was already preparing the women who were in line to replace the strikers in the event of their deaths. The 1980 hunger strike ended in the H-blocks on December 18th. In Armagh Gaol, The three women were listening to the 9 o'clock news on their smuggled radio and heard that the hunger strike was over. Their initial reaction was one of elation, but caution soon took over. The women decided to continue their own fast until the news was confirmed by a Republican source. A representative confirmed the news the following day, and the Armagh Three declared an end to their hunger strike. It had lasted 19 days. Like many of the Republican women who fought in the Easter Rising 100 years ago, the Armagh women were initially told by well-meaning leaders, "No, we don't think it's a good idea for you ladies to participate." Like the women of the Rising, the Armagh prisoners refused to accept that response. They insisted upon their inclusion, upon being allowed an equal share in every aspect of the Republican struggle. On March 6, 1988, 3 unarmed Irish citizens were shot dead at close range by undercover operatives of the notorious British SAS as they walked along a public street on the island of Gibraltar. This summary execution of 3 IRA volunteers spawned a series of tragic incidents, the reverberations of which continued long after the event. The 3 volunteers, Mairead Farrell, Daniel McCann, and Sean Savage, were unarmed and had been under surveillance for some time by both the British Secret Services and Spanish. It is clear from all the evidence that they were lulled into a carefully laid trap with the aim of killing them. The killings on Gibraltar were immediately followed by a massive cover-up, with lies from the British Ministry of Defense falsely stating that a suspected bomb had been found in Gibraltar. The SAS claimed that all 3 reached for hidden detonators when challenged to surrender, and that only minimum force had been used. However, the wounds received by the 3 spoke for themselves. Mairead Farrell was shot 5 times, twice in the head, 3 times in the body. The bullets to the head were fired into her face and exited under her left ear and at the back of her neck. The 3 bullets that were fired into the middle of her back exited in the region of her left breast. Her heart and liver were pulped, her spinal column fractured, and her chest cavity was awash with 2 liters of blood. Daniel McCann was shot 4 times, twice in the head and twice in the back. The 2 shots to his back caused damage to his liver, heart, and left lung. The 2 shots to his head caused multiple fractures, laceration of the left cerebral hemisphere, and extensive brain damage. Sean Savage was shot at least 16 times. He suffered 29 separate injuries. His arm was broken and he had various wounds on his torso. 5 bullets entered his back and his lung was severely damaged. 4 bullets entered his head and he had multiple damage to the brain and skull.